Welcome to the BYU Management Society Young Professional Career Engagement Program. Today we have the opportunity to meet with Brent Allred, who is an architect. And I know, Brent, you've been an architect for several years. How many years has it been?
It's been over 45 years that I've been licensed.
45 years. And what made you originally think, hey, I wanted to be an architect?
Well, it was strangely enough, when I was 10 years old in elementary school, I really enjoyed math and was pretty good at it. And I also was pretty good at art. I enjoyed that, right? I enjoyed drawing. And my teacher, give her credit, said, if you put those two together, I think you're really going to be good at in architecture. So from that point, I decided to be an architect. And I haven't varied from it to this day.
So when you were 10 years old, you decided, hey, I want to do this. I want to be an architect. And you've been focused on that ever since. That's impressive.
I had no idea what I was getting into, but it was, yeah, it was pretty
And,
solid from that point.
and you own your own firm, right? So how long have you owned your own firm?
Um, my firm here in Colorado really started when I moved here, but I had been doing work on my own before that. So pretty much on my own, I've been working for, 40 years.
Mhm.
So, and doing my own stuff.
And what made you kind of decide, hey, I want to do my own stuff, right? Own your own firm and do your own stuff.
I really enjoy design. Now, there are many architectural types out there, and not all of them get to design in a in a holistic sort of way. There's designs at every level in the architecture process. But I wanted that holistic design approach. I loved problem solving, and I particularly loved creating something that people can live in that they would enjoy every day, not only from the inside and their function, but people in the outside world, the community would enjoy having that building in front of them for 75 years. And, a building can last that long and even longer. Some of the classics have lasted over 1,000 years. So I always think of architecture as something that people in the future will be proud of and said, we're glad that that was designed. There's so much architecture out there that it's just for the here and now and for profit, and that's sad. Wanted to improve on that, and I think we have.
Okay, well, great. And so, obviously you have your own style, right, of your buildings. I've seen some of your buildings, right? In fact, you built a building for me. You designed one of my office
That's right.
buildings, right?
You
And
were one
so
of the best clients we had.
exactly, exactly. So where does your design come from, right? Who do you look to? Like there's the Frank Lloyd Wrights and other people. Who's your kind of people inspiration? People you look to.
Well, it's interesting. Before I went to college, I did not know too many professional architects. My dad encouraged me out of high school to take my small little portfolio that I had developed in high school and apply to an architecture firm here in Boulder, Colorado, which I did. And then I got to immerse myself in a professional environment. That's a really strong way to learn things. In the architecture field, um, there is so much that has to be learned by doing and by from mentors and others. So the sooner one can get into a practice of some kind, the more they can learn real world architecture. When was in college, I began to study Frank Lloyd Wright, and the more I learned about him, the more I understood his principles that he believed in rang true to me. Those were great principles of organic architecture that needs to feel like it's growing out of the ground and being a part of this world. Um, a little side story. My dad took me up to a restaurant there in Boulder, Colorado, at a place called NCAR. NCAR is the National Center for Atmospheric Research. And little did I know, it had been designed by a world famous architect named I.M. Pei. I was really impressed with the design of that architecture. And when I went for oral interviews at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, the professor there asked, "Who's your favorite architect, or what piece of architecture has inspired you?" And there were many answers from various people around the room, but I told them about NCAR, designed by I.M. Pei, and that impressed him. And that's how I got into Cal Poly, which was an impacted school. So knowing good quality architects and architecture is a valuable experience, and the more you can learn, the better you will become as you're in school. You will develop your own style, which is important, but learning principles really helped me to understand things I needed to do in the real world of architecture.
Mhm. So what I'm hearing is that, okay, schooling is important, but it's also important to have some of these other things as well, right? Looking at architect, trying to understand, looking at having those experiences, right? Seeing if you can do volunteer work or have a mentor that helps you, etc. Is there anything else that you would recommend if somebody's interested in saying, "Hey, I might want to be an architect." What would you recommend them to be successful?
You bet. It is very important, vital that you get some construction experience. Understand how buildings are put together. Now, there's a variety of building types. There's a wood frame, there's steel, post and beam, there's concrete, etc. It's going to be difficult as a new person to architecture to get experience in the more high-end commercial areas like concrete and steel. But if you can take classes and even get onto job sites where those things are under construction and ask questions. Why is this? Why is that? Architects love to explain what they know. They think this is the greatest thing, and then wood frame is what you have in your house, typically, assuming that you're from the United States. If you're from another country, you may already be familiar with concrete, like if you're from the Philippines, that's concrete is like wood framing is to us. It's become really familiar with that, but then I'll also branch out and learn other building types. And if you can get out in the field, swing a hammer, do construction, you'll begin to see that it's just not drawings on paper. Every line that you put on paper is telling somebody to build it a certain way. And if you understand how construction works, you're going to excel. You are really going to excel in architecture because that's where the tire meets the road. Architects are the arch technicians. They're the orchestrators. They're leading all this orchestra, these instruments. And you need to know a little bit how each instrument is being played to make it come off really good.
Mhm. I like the way you say that, right? Because having been on a project with you, right, I understand that there's the different people, right? So who are those different? You got your people that are actually making the building, right? But who else is involved with the building process?
That's a great question.
The orchestra that you're leading.
It is because I didn't understand all the individuals involved, and it takes a village, so to speak, to make a building. Um, so as the architect, it really means arch technician. Under his umbrella, he gathers consultants because it's just really difficult for an architect to know everything. So he has a structural engineer that works for him. These are consultants, not employees, but consultants. Then he has mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineers. And then he's got landscape architects, and he's got a civil engineer. Those are the basic ones, and then it can expand depending on the building type. You may need acoustical engineer. You may need other types of engineers that you bring together under one umbrella, the architect, and you work as a team. Um, and you coordinate that effort to create this building. Now that's the design team. There are two other major um, parts of the whole process, in individuals, if you will. There's the contractor. He doesn't come into play usually until after the building is designed. But there are times when you may want to bring him in at the beginning and start asking him. I'm more of that kind of a architect, where I like to collaborate. I like to learn what contractors know, because if I can make a better building by knowing that this process is cost less and it's more effective, then the client benefits from that. That leads me to the third major spoke of this three-spoke huge wheel that's going to turn. That's the architecture and the design team. Then you have the contractor and his team, and then you have the owner. The owner is doing this building not because they want to give you a an award somewhere. They don't care. What they want is a function that's met. They have to have a budget. They know what they're going to do. They have goals. And it's important for the architect to listen to those goals and implement them. There's no such thing as designing in a vacuum. And the goals of the client start the process and define the parameters by which you can succeed in a piece of architecture. So just remember, listening to the client and their goals is really helpful, and also understanding construction. Those are the basic three components, Mike, for how buildings get built.
hmm Yeah, and I would say our experience, right? That was one thing that I really appreciated working with you, right? Is that, hey, we had a budget, right? And so working with the three teams, right? The contractor, you and me, and saying, okay, how are we going to meet this budget, right? If, I know one part was Brent wanted a bigger awning than I was able to give him with my budget, right?
Mhm.
But having that conversation, right? And saying, okay, hey, if we do this thing wood frame versus steel, is that, the contractor said we could save some money doing that, et cetera, right? So just looking at all those components and the three teams working together, I think really kind of made a successful building in my mind, right? Is we were able to get a great looking building that was very functional that was done under Mike's budget, right?
That's
So
right.
everybody was happy at the end of the day, right? So
That's
good.
right. And that's, I think, in my book, that's successful architecture. It may not win an award, but that I've known a lot of buildings that won awards, and the user, which is the owner, um, is constantly complaining about things that aren't functioning right, in the building. So when you get those things right, then you really have a great success.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So you talked a little bit about schooling, right? What other requirements are there? Is that like a 4-year program? And then is there other educational requirements to be an architect?
Sure. The best thing you can do in high school is, take some drafting classes, get your feet wet in terms of drawing and so forth. Then in college, take the requirements that you need to get your GE, and then dive into the core classes of architecture. To practice architecture, one needs to have a license. And the most direct and efficient way to get a license is to go to an accredited school. Remember the word accredited. There are many architecture schools, and some schools are not even accredited. So you will not get credit for attending those schools because you need that credit towards getting the license. And then amongst the credited schools, some are higher, have higher accreditations than others. You want to make sure that the college you're going to has a really good accredited school because they a lot of those classes will then transfer into giving you credit towards your license, and they will prepare you the best for licensure. Now, you can work for a firm and not be licensed. The principal of that firm must carry a license. So all the architecture you do in that firm is under his license or her license, and you don't have to be licensed. But working towards your license is is a career goal that I would encourage you to do because it forces you to become educated on all kinds of levels of architecture because those exam questions cover the whole gamut of things. So in order to practice architecture, you need to have a license or you need to work under somebody that has a license. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. And
yeah,
it sounds like in your case, right? You wanted to do your own designs and your own kind of direction and make your own stuff, right? Which wouldn't have been possible if you didn't have that license.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And there's it's such a deep field that you're always learning. So once you get into architecture, you just can keep taking classes and learning about those things.
Yeah. And I'm assuming you have like annual educational requirements to keep that license current.
That is correct. Yeah. Every state requires so many hours of um, educational credits, and you can get that in various ways. Um, applying the materials and all the interesting nuances that are being developed for exterior materials, interior materials is really a fun way to do architecture. Um, you don't want to be applying the cutting edge materials because, as they say, the cutting edge materials is the bloody edge materials, and it can come back to bite you. You want trusted materials, trusted systems that you can rely upon. But learning those and applying those is really fun. That I love that about architecture is that every project is new. There's no such thing as a repeat project. It's like doing a prototype
Hmm.
every single time, and it's quite exciting. You from the site plan all the way up through the roof. It's great.
So you got excited, right, when you were talking about some of those projects. Which is the project that you're like most proud of? So if you said, "Hey, Mike, you need to go see this building," what would it be?
Well, there are several projects that I really love doing. Um, one's right here in Broomfield. There's several right here in Broomfield. We finished. We do a lot of fire stations, and we've that's become a niche for us. And some of the fire stations we've done are really fun and interesting. I can't take full credit. I have a really good, hardworking team that makes those things possible. But they're like the Fire Station 61 right here out off of Midway Boulevard, Midway is a really fun station. And and then their headquarters, which is on First Street and Lamar, was a really fun station. We just finished three stations in Pueblo, Colorado, for, net zero. And what that means is the stations are strictly electric, no gas, except for an emergency backup generator. And they run off geothermal heat pumps, so efficient that the solar voltaic on the roof compensates for all the electricity that they use, and it's a net zero. They basically sell back electricity to the a company the power company, so that they're really not using any power at all. That's fun, and that was really a great project to work on.
Mhm. Which sounds like a great thing, right? For some of these young people that really want to make a difference in the world, right? With the green stuff that's going on right now, that you are able to design those type of buildings, right? They're net zero. That's impressive. So probably a
It
good
is.
way for them to impact the world around them.
Absolutely. It is architecture, um, we're talking buildings now, generate or require, I don't know, it is a huge amount of energy in the world. We're in the 75% of all the energy consumption comes from buildings. So it's no wonder that the AIA initiative is to have um, net zero building by 2030. And I don't know that they're going to reach that, but that's the goal. And to be in tune with that, that's really cool. Um, so having clients that are in tune with it is a huge success and step, and working with them to achieve those things is it's exciting.
And you said that, you kind of got in that niche of fire stations, right? Obviously, that doesn't seem like something you would start 40 years ago. So
No.
what kind of directed that? How did you get into fire stations?
Oh, Mike, yeah, it was when I hired project manager in my office, Brad Bonnet. He came and had done a fire station for North Metro Fire Rescue District with under another firm, and they liked his work. They tracked down where he came, and they approached us and said, "How would you like to work on these next two or three stations? By the way, if we let you do that, will you design us a 9/11 memorial?" And so we did, and a beautiful 9/11 memorial. It's the largest memorial west of the Mississippi for the 9/11 events that occurred years ago. So well, that's how we got into it, and then it was just one after another, and then clients talk, and these particular clients, chiefs, fire chiefs, they talk amongst themselves, and then when they do a station, they will tell their buddies about it, and that's how word of mouth gets spread, and that's how we were very fortunate to continue in that realm.
Hmm. No, yeah, and right, doing a good job, right, is very important because that's what's going to happen, right? Is it's the
Yes,
word of mouth is going to spread one way or the other, right?
it is.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah, I think that does make a big impact in your career and how successful you are. Okay. Well, good. So, is there any books or things on the web or whatever if somebody is interested in that career that you would recommend them to read, to look at, you know, architects to be inspired by, etc.?
I would read books by other architects, but remember, um, it's not, I don't think it's healthy a goal to pursue awards, but that's my personal feel. I think more healthy is to understand the principles of architecture and be able to apply them. And if you do that, the rewards will come, awards will come. And so get those priorities in the right order, learn, serve, and then those awards will come. I think taking classes and books, but then getting out and studying architecture uh, in the field, sketching, going to construction sites, understanding what's going on, ask questions. And the people in my office that excel the most are the ones who ask the questions and have this curiosity that just won't give up.
Okay. And you say that they're successful because they ask questions. Is that asking questions of you, of the contractors, of the builders, I mean, of the owners, et cetera, et cetera? What questions are they asking, and what makes a good question?
Well, asking questions of the superiors and colleagues, I think that's where you can ask questions, and they say, and there's no dumb questions. they're only dumb questions if you're in front of a client and you're asked the wrong question.
Mhm.
So don't ask clients every question you can conceive of, but ask your colleagues and then ask contractors, why they do that or how they do that, what's the sequence and so forth. Those are all good questions and understanding process. I learned from a professor, he said, if you want to understand a concept, a system, or an idea, you have to understand every word associated with that concept. If somebody throws out a word you've never heard before, write it down and ask. That reminds me of when you and I were learning Japanese, Mike. Uh, we had these little notebooks, right? And
Mhm.
when you're in a lesson and you heard a word you never heard before, you wrote it down. And you may not have had time to ask it, but then you go back to your little Jibiki and look it up and learn that word. And that's a really great way to learn. If you learn what each word means, you will understand the concept.
Mhm.
But there's five words you know and there's two you don't, you won't understand that concept until you understand those words.
Good, good. All right. So in closing here, Brent, if you were to give somebody career advice to be an architect, right? What would that be, right? What would that career advice be for that individual?
There was when I went to BYU, there was no architecture school, and there still is an architecture school. Someday, hopefully, there will be. There was one up north. I won't mention by name,
Mhm.
but I was in the temples, and this is an audience that I think will relate to this. And the sealer in there was Fred Markham, who was an architect who had served in the Wasatch Front. He also served as an accreditor for architecture schools, which I didn't know that that existed before. I told him where I was thinking of going, and he says, "You don't want to go there. Um, they barely passed their accreditation." And so then I began to look in the resources of the library with my counselor, and I came across um, California Polytechnic State University. And they actually showed the placement of architecture students in jobs, and it was in the 98th percentile. And that means they're doing something right. Now, that was over 40 years ago. And whether that's still the same, I don't know. But that led me to go to a really good school where I was very comfortable that I would find placement after I graduated. You can make that kind of decision now that will help you in the future.
Yeah,
From
I couldn't agree more, Brent. I mean, looking at that, what is the outcome of this 4 years, right? And if the outcome of that 4 years is to get a job, it really helps to say, okay, what is that? Is it 98% and everybody, is getting hired? Or is it like 8%, right? And somebody has to go get a master's and other things, and they don't get the job that they wanted to. Think about when you're doing that schooling, right? What's the end goal here? What am I trying to accomplish? It makes a big.
and Mike, you mentioned that uh, do I get a bachelor's or do I get a master's? Do I get a PhD? Well, I'm not sure where the schools are at now. When I went to Cal Poly, it was a 5-year degree, but it was a Bachelor of Science. I never had to go to get a master's because Cal Poly was so good. Um, the, the, when I told them I was from Cal Poly, anybody who knew about Cal Poly in California was ready to hire me if they had a job opening.
Mhm.
And you get farther east, and is not as well known, but um, some places you don't get that with a bachelor's. You have to go on to get a master's, and that's more time. So you want to consider those options as you select a school as well.
Mhm. Well, Brent, I appreciate your comments today.
Thanks,
It's
Mike.
been very, very insightful. Um, and we, appreciate it with from the BYU Management Society, right? The Young Professional Career Engagement Program is designed to help young professionals decide what they want to do with their careers, right? So I'm assuming that if anybody listens to this and wants to reach out, they're more than welcome to reach out to you if they have any questions or would like to do an informational interview. If anybody would like to do that, please look at the website and there's information up out there of how to do an informational interview, etc. So again, appreciate it, Brent, and we'll talk to you later.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
See ya.